we know that our nation has the capability to put a man on the moon or send rockets around Mars, send even a Tesla car to Mars and back. So clearly we have the capability to build roads and bridges, broadband access, energy grids, and other infrastructure that is as great as what we saw in the movie Black Panther. Did anybody, who here did not see the movie Black Panther actually? Still some folks who have left yet to see the movie. Well, I'll tell you without spoiling the opportunity that the infrastructure that we saw in Wakanda was phenomenal. We saw levitating trains. We saw buildings looking better than probably any building that you've seen here in the United States. We saw vehicles, space vehicles, as well as I think they said levitating skateboards. Again, all demonstrating the technological prowess of this fictitious imaginary nation in Africa. But yet, we have the capability of realizing that technology here with the right investment. Recently, the president announced a plan to leverage $1.5 trillion for the creation of that type of infrastructure. However, in just listening to a recent news report about the cost of a bridge over the Potomac, which was around $50 million, you can see that it would take much more than 1.5 trillion even to just create new roads and new bridges, let alone new broadband access, new trains, and new telephone systems and other types of infrastructure that we need in order to make this country great. So we at STEM for Us are very grateful that all of you all have joined us today to have this very important conversation. We have some very heavy hitters, and I don't want to take up any of their time because I want to allow them to basically convey to you the sentiments that they each have to offer, both from a business perspective and an educational perspective about what we need to do in order to create this Wakandan infrastructure that we saw and we talked about. But before we bring on our heavy-hitting speakers, we could not have this event were it not for the gracious hospitality of our partner, NASDAQ, which has opened up its doors countless times for STEM for Us, both for the events that we've had in conjunction with the Congressional Black Caucus Annual Legislative Conference and for programs like this that happen during Black History Month. Their demonstration of diversity is clear, not just in terms of the programming that it supports through partnerships like ours, but also the work that they do to make sure that the members that are traded, the member companies that are traded on their exchange look like some of the people who are in this room. But nevertheless, as I'm sure our colleague will say, his work isn't done. And clearly your work to make sure that we create a new generation of entrepreneurs can support their work. So again, we are all in this together. So without any further ado, I want to bring on the Associate Vice President for NASDAQ, Jameel Johnson. Let's give a round of applause.
Well, I'll be sitting on one of the panels later on, so I just want to say good afternoon, welcome to NASDAQ. You're actually in what's in our government relations office, or those of us on the government relations team consider this the government relations office before we started bringing in the marketing team and the website team and the market surveillance team. But obviously, we're known as an exchange. That's what our core is. That's what we created as in 1971, actually as a stock market that eventually became a licensed exchange. But we have grown so much beyond that to we are now known as a financial technology, as many people call it, a fintech organization, in which we provide technological solutions to companies on multiple levels related to board management, marketing, finance, so many different issues that we've grown in. But with the issue of bringing entrepreneurs and capital together to help those companies grow, really still being the core of what we do. And one of the issues when you talk about improving jobs and economics in this country is the issue of making sure that that reaches to all corners of the country, all groups. You know, anytime a young entrepreneur can come along board, or an older entrepreneur can come along board and create something and get that capital and reach level after level after level and create jobs. The IPO market, the IPO pipeline is what allows not only those companies to really be able to grow fast and create jobs, but also allows for what you call the democratization of investment, in the sense of everybody can perhaps take that ride with that company. You know the old saying, I should have bought IBM at $5, right? I should have bought Apple when it was still at $10. So that is very important to us in regards to everybody being able to participate in the benefit of the markets as opposed to just a few. So at this point, I'll let you finish eating your lunch and have Tyler continue with the program.
Well, again, let's again give another round of applause to our partner, NASDAQ. We also want to recognize our additional partners, the Washington Teachers Union, and the embodiment of their outstanding president, Elizabeth Davis, not to be mistaken for Liz Davis, but she said her mom did not name her Liz, and so again, we give all due credit to her mother for not only birthing a brilliant leader, but guiding her to the position where she is in right now, leading thousands of district teachers and really being the leading voice for teachers in the nation, because here in Washington, D.C., it is the Washington Teachers Union, which is a part of the American Federation of Teachers, which is the leading of all the teachers, American Federation of Teachers Unions across the country. This is where the spotlight is most often here in Washington. And so as the embodiment of the entire union, being the leaders of this teachers union, it is critical that we at STEM for Us have our ears connected to their voices, because they are on the front line of training our young people for these infrastructure jobs. If we need to know what is the status of education, how else can we get that status check without connecting with and seeking the advice of the Washington Teachers Union? So again, let us give a round of applause to the Washington Teachers Union for its. We also have had the support of Lincoln University, one of our great educational institutions, one of the first African American institutions founded in 1854, and their president saw fit to tap one of her top technology education advisors, the director of the office that seeks the grants and other types of funded programs to support the technology education that is taking place on their campus. So again, let us give a round of applause for Lincoln University for its support. So I'm going to now turn this program over to a capable moderator, someone who has been involved with education for almost as long as he's been alive. This young man is really one of the leaders of the educational community. Someone who served as previously as an editor-in-chief of the Journal of Negro Education before going to the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and doing some cutting-edge research and writing, and then tapped by the Obama administration to serve as the White House, the executive director of the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And after doing a phenomenal job there, he took a position as the CEO of the QEM network, along with a professor position back in our alma mater of Howard University, and then also reassumed his position as the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Negro Education. Someone who knows education, particularly the educational needs that affect and that are created for people of color. and that is none other than Dr. Ivory Tolson, who's going to be, again, introducing the rest of the speakers, going through the sessions, both the business panel, doing the Q&A session, allowing for some time after the Q&A session for remarks from our chair of the DC Public Service Commission, and then moving on to our educational panel. So let's put our hands together for Dr. Ivory Tolson. Absolutely.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us, and I want to thank STEM for Us for all of their leadership on these topics. I know this organization has been around for quite some time. I'm not sure the founding year, but I know as far back as to when I was with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I was very familiar with their work and have, this is probably my third time presenting for them, so I guess I've done something right the previous two times, so thank them for that. So just to give a brief introduction to this topic, some of the things that's been on my mind, the whole idea of STEM education being a civil right. It's not a luxury. It's not something that should just be a luxury to the most affluent of society. But if the United States is really going to be able to keep up, it needs to be available to all. And when we think about this connection between STEM and infrastructure, I think that's such a vitally important topic because too oftentimes people separate the two. People separate STEM education from the infrastructure, and that's largely because we have this antiquated way of thinking about the work that needs to be done to have an effective infrastructure in place. Now, when we think about education, we think about where our children are being educated. The educational system, as we know it today, was developed during the time when the United States was an agricultural country, where agriculture was a dominant field. And in fact, the reason why our children still get out of school during the summers today is because that's when the crops are most plentiful. And back during the time when education was first implemented, a lot of the children went to farm crops during the summer. Now, since the agricultural era, we've gone through an industrial revolution where a lot of our children were picking up trades and their desires was to go to factories and do labor, and a lot of people made a very good living off of doing things like putting bolts into cars and different things like that. And we rapidly went from this industrial era to the information age, which is about where we are right now. We're pretty steep. The information age is kind of it's been around for quite some time. But the next age that we're entering into right now is the automation age. So it's the age that extends beyond the information age and to a place where we're actually going to have machines and technology and computers and digitized systems that are doing the bulk of the work that humans used to do. And our schools, still with some remnants of an age that's our 5 generations removed, is not really adapting to the reality that the education that children need right now is completely different than what they needed even 10 years ago. Now, when we look at how most students are educated right now, we know from the Civil Rights Data Collection that the majority of schools that have the highest percentage of Black and brown students, the high schools, are omitting higher level math and science from their curriculum. Most students who look like us, most high school students that look like us that are going to public schools today couldn't take physics if they wanted to. They couldn't take calculus if they had the capability. They couldn't take computer science even if naturally they are computer wizards. And that's because they simply do not have them in the curriculum. And that's because we still haven't gotten to the place where we're looking at STEM education as a civil right. If we were at the same place that we were 50 years ago, where some students didn't have access to high school education at all, we would all be up in arms. We would say there are rural pockets where there are a lot of black students where they can't even go to high school. That would be appalling. But now today, right here in Washington, D.C., we have schools that do not have physics, even though every competitive institution in this region requires physics for admissions. So we have students, just by virtue of their zip code, who cannot go to the high school or the college of their choice, where they could only go to community college, not because of their intellect, but because of a lack of opportunity. So when we think about the importance of tying infrastructure to STEM, it's vitally important at all sectors of education, from preschool on up to higher education. So we have a very capable panel. We in fact have two panels, the business panel and the educational panel. And I'm going to call out each panelist and just give their title and their company, and they're going to tell you a little bit more about their work, and we're going to engage in a conversation about these very important issues. So first, we want to bring up Jameel Johnson, Associate Vice President of NASDAQ. Maureen A. Lewis, Director of Minority Telecommunications Development for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Galvin Logan, Urban League Telecommunications Fellow. And Betty Ann Kane, Chair of DC Public Service Commission.
Ms. Kane is right now testifying in front of legislature.
Okay.
And she will be here as soon as she can. I can substitute for her until she gets here if you'd like.
Okay, sure.
And
your name, sir?
My name is Dan Cleverton, and I'm a policy advisor to Ms. Kane.
Okay. Okay, so what I want us to do first is, starting with Jameel and making our way down, just spend about 3 minutes telling the participants about your work and how your work ties into this important issue of tying infrastructure, workforce development to STEM.
Well, let me give you the background. It's not I wouldn't say it's a very direct interconnection, my work in that particular topic. My work is for the Government Relations Office at NASDAQ. I'm one of their lobbyists. Our goal is to make sure that the business model of NASDAQ, which is to make it as beneficial and as efficient for companies who want to go into the public markets, to be able to do so. The benefit, like I said, of that, as I was speaking, is not only in job creation, but ultimately it's about what an exchange does, which is connecting capital with entrepreneurship. Not on the lowest level, we're not a small bank, we don't finance, even though every now and then we will, from a strategic point of view, make a direct investment, an equity investment into a company that we think is growing, but also fits kind of what we do, which is in the fintech area. But as companies grow, for instance, we have what we call a NASDAQ private market, which takes companies that are in a growth stage but are not ready to go public yet, or may choose not to go public at all, to help them do a secondary market sale of their stock. So for instance, you may join a company that says, hey, look, I know that you're worth X amount. Matter of fact, I know that you're worth X plus amount in the market. But we're a young starting company, and I can't offer you X plus, I can only offer you X. But what I will do is give you, as part of your compensation, a certain amount of stock, right? But the problem is, when the company is private, it's like you have the stock, and there is a private valuation of it. There's not a market valuation. There's a private valuation of it.
But, okay, so you have a private valuation, but where do you sell it, right? And the company controls your ability to sell that stock and who the owners are. So sometimes it comes to a point, and what's happening is that companies are actually going public a lot later than they once used to. Fast-growing companies used to go public between 3 and 5 years. Now they're going public between 5 and 10 years. And I'm trying to veer back on this topic as I talk about what we do. So many times those companies, their employees will be like, hey, you know what, my kid, so the time I joined here, my kid has gone into college. I need to sell some of that stock. We help provide that kind of market to other accredited investors and institutions and work with the company to help do that stock sale. And as they get bigger, if they want to grow more, obviously we're a listing venue that can give that company a place to enter the public markets. But what we also do is provide various technological solutions in how they manage their business, their corporate governance, how they manage their stock tables, all those various issues that we've gone as, which has been an outgrowth of who we are as a company. Now, the issue of infrastructure that's so important to us is that in 1971, NASDAQ created the electronic trading facility. Everything used to be what you were used to seeing on TV. The floor trading, people with pieces of paper, throwing, yelling, the trading places, what you saw, sell and this and that. After we created electronic trading, there was a period of time when very few were doing it, but new markets would come up with it. And then you had a kind of a time period where there was a kind of floor trading versus electronic trading period, but then eventually floor trading went away. You talked about automation. One of the things that's interesting is people say, well, automate, there's jobs issues, but one thing you have to realize, you can't stop progress. People will not stop thinking, they will not stop innovating, so the question is how do you take advantage of it and become a part of it? So now electronic trading is the way of the markets all over. The New York Stock Exchange floor is mostly electronic now. CME, the biggest exchange in the country that trades commodities, is mostly electronic now. But because of that, the electronic infrastructure matters to us because that's how the trades come in now. They come in from you on the retail side or on the institutional side to your broker-dealer. They come into the exchange electronically, and the market data that comes in, the buys, the sells, the bids, all go out electronically. And the speed at which they're going out is constantly increasing to fractions, thousands of fractions of a second. But you need the networks in order to get that done. It used to be, it was always about beating somebody to a trade, to the best price. But what it used to be was you started opening up an office across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. So you ran that guy over to the
I actually have some follow-up questions for you. So hold that thought. We're going to get through the rest of the panel, and then we're going to get into some Q&A between me and you and us and them. So Maureen, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and how that ties into our
Certainly. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am a representative of the domestic policy staff at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is a long name for a small agency, which is a Commerce Department agency focused on telecommunications and internet policy. We are relatively small in the Commerce Department, but it's interesting that we are in commerce because the department's focus is on helping to ensure the global competitiveness and the growth of U.S. companies. And to bring this back to the infrastructure point, infrastructure is very important, and my agency in the previous administration had a Recovery Act program that distributed $4.5 billion of Recovery Act funding to fund projects focused on deploying broadband infrastructure to unserved and underserved areas and populations. And that's important because this new administration, and Commerce is part of the administration, and my agency is the advisor to the administration on telecommunications and internet policy. we're very anxious to ensure that there is more infrastructure because there are lots of unserved pockets that remain in this country. And to bring this back to the education point, that means that there are educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities that are being missed because people do not have connections to broadband infrastructure. So my focus actually has been, as part of the domestic policy staff, is to study issues around computer and internet use. And so since 1994, NTIA has been conducting, as a supplement to the current population survey, a survey about why people are using computers, why they don't use the computers, and the kinds of activities that they conduct online. So in recent years, we have gone to sort of a every other year data collection. So most recently, our November 17 data collection went into the field by the Census Bureau. We're expecting new data in the spring. And so this information is widely relied upon by policymakers to help understand the whole issue about the connection of actual broadband deployment and access and what people are and are not doing online.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Gavin.
Thank you. I've been with the Urban League a short time, 7 months. I'm the Tech and Telecom Fellow here at the National Urban League. Prior to that, for the previous 6 years, I was an Assistant Attorney General at the District of Columbia in the Office of Cable Television, well, what is now the Office of Cable Television, Film, Music, and Entertainment, where I worked on we were the cable franchise regulator, among other things in terms of media and entertainment. But before we go on, I would like to kind of build on some of the allusions you made in terms of putting it into context. And that it's simply this. We missed out on the farming revolution because we were slaves, right? We missed out on the industrial revolution due to Jim Crow, by and large, right? Time like this is the next opportunity, and it's important that we don't miss out on this technological revolution. And so where the Urban League fits into that, it's quite naturally from that, and that the birth of the Urban League was by and large trying to help these agrarian farmers who were flocking to the north find jobs, make it into the city, make it in these urban environments. So in that vein, we still continue to work in the technology sector. One of the things we have developed is the Wireless Infrastructure Apprenticeship Access Program, which is we received a contract from the Department of Labor to set up apprenticeship program to help black and brown folk be part of this infrastructure building. So that is one of the reasons why the infrastructure bill is of particular interest to us, because it has direct impact on our ability to fulfill our obligations under our DOL contract. So, yeah.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. All right, and I forgot your name.
Dan.
I was about to call you Betty.
I wish I had my chair. As I said, I work for the Public Service Commission, and as most people know, we regulate the traditional utilities. But one of the things that we're doing right now is that we're having let's say a program, but an idea of what the grid, the distribution grid in the district is going to look like in the future. We right now have over 3,000 generators in the District of Columbia, very small generators, usually rooftop solar, hooked up to the district. By 2032, that number is going to go up to somewhere between 10 and 15,000. So right now we have a grid that goes one way. All the electricity comes in and goes out. But by then, we're going to have a grid where the flows are going to be multi-directional. Within that, we also are going to have services that are needed by the grid, services that are now provided by PEPCO and by PJM, but can be provided by any of these 15 to 20,000 sort of connections. So what we're looking at is how we get to a grid that just isn't sort of one-way flows or isn't controlled by one entity, but that the people who have made the investments or had the investments made on their behalf, who own or control these 15,000 points, that can provide services, how they interact with the grid, how they sell their services to the grid, how they purchase their services from the grid. In many respects, what we're going to have, we're going to have a networked grid, so it's not going to be just, it's going to be multi-flows going like crazy. We need an incredible amount of communications and technology in order to do that. We will wind up sort of in many respects, just our electric grid alone will start looking like NASDAQ in some respects in terms of it being an electronic trading area where every couple of seconds or microseconds even, that the system on my roof says, should I buy from the grid or should I sell to the grid? I'm going to have storage over here. Should I put it in storage? Should I take it out of storage? And the grid is going to tell me I need some VAR support over here. I need voltage support over here. And I'll say, well, I'll offer that, and here's the price. And then it will sort of run an auction and select everything that does. That is we will be among the first to do this kind of thing in the country. New York State is probably ahead of everybody else. But we will be sort of along par. I think the East Coast will be ahead of everybody else. California too, but that's different. But in order to do this, we're going to need an awful lot of really smart people. And we need not only smart people, we need smart people who know their community. And it's a tremendous opportunity. I have a hard time contemplating a school in a place like the District of Columbia that doesn't have physics. I mean, no, that is. I'm sorry. I can't. It doesn't compute in my head. We got to do that.
I have a follow-up question for you also. Let's go ahead and go into our first round of questions. Jameel, you talked about the importance of entrepreneurship, and you gave us some information regarding setting up publicly traded companies and different things like that. And one of the things that I thought about was the fact that Asian Americans are the most likely to have STEM degrees right now. But white males are still the ones who are making the most money. And the comparison between Asian males and STEM degrees and white males is not even close. And in fact, most of our technical universities, like MIT and Georgia Tech and things like that, their immigrant population is around 40%. So my question to you is, how important is it that we tie STEM education to the education and corporate sector? And is the fact that there's this income disparity between white males and Asian males, despite the fact that Asian males are out-educating white males by total degree production and certainly STEM degrees, how much of that is a function of injustice in our society, or the fact that people of color just don't have the business acumen to make the kind of capital that we need to make?
First phrase I would use in regards to that is a question of asset control, right?
You all hear him in the back?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. Ultimately, the one who makes the money is the one who controls the assets. Who do you go to see? Mark Cuban or Dirk Nowitzki? Right?
Yeah.
Cuban makes a lot more money than Nowitzki does, even though Nowitzki is rich. He's the product, but he's not the ownership. It's the same thing with land. You started off by the gentleman here started off talking about the issue of missing out on farming. What was supposed to happen at the end of the Civil War, right? 40 acres and a mule. There was a reason we never got to 40 acres. That's ownership. That is control. So the key thing here is that as long as we're in a situation where even if you get the education, the best that you're able to do is become an employee, and perhaps you're an employee who really moves up the ladder. You get to mid-management and so on and so forth. ultimately, no company is designed to make the employees more money than the owners. So the key thing of entrepreneurship and the question of tying in, and here is where, for instance, HBCUs can be very helpful to us. As a matter of fact, later on this afternoon, I work with some people who are dealing with Maryland's legislation regarding fairness and funding for HBCUs. Is the issue of tying in not only STEM education, but tying STEM education and every other aspect, STEM education, media studies, you name it, arts and literature, to entrepreneurship and financing, so that you're not just taking your skills and selling them to, basically selling them to someone else for a much lower price than the market will bear, because that's basically what you do. Whether you're an athlete, an employee at a particular company, Lord knows you see in the entertainment business all the time. You're taking an asset that has a value of this, and you're selling it into the market to someone else for this price, and they're getting the difference between here and there. So the issue is tying in that education to entrepreneurship so you can take the skills that you develop and you can capitalize on the market value of them.
So when should we start teaching entrepreneurship?
I would say you can go back as early as, say, junior high school,
Pre-K.
high school, little things.
Lemonade stand.
There you go.
Well, I'm trying to be fair to the school system.
That is fair.
because
That is fair.
'cause
That is,
they're
Yes.
not getting, like I said, they don't have a physics class in high school. So, the question becomes when we start, but that mindset of how do I take what I have and turn it, how do I monetize my abilities? Employment is one thing, but how do I monetize it to a larger market?
Yeah.
Is ultimately what you want to do versus having, as opposed to being what's his name, Tom in the Godfather, who says, I have a specialized practice. I have I have one client. No, every employee has a specialized practice. We have one client.
Yeah.
What we ultimately want is to have a diverse clientele where we're able to maximize that usage of it. So you want people thinking differently.
Yeah.
I mean, many of the friends I know, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but many of my friends that attended Howard, they're entrepreneurs. They come out with, they must be doing something right over there, because a lot of them come out with an entrepreneurial mindset that they're going to go do and make their own. We need that much more across the board.
Yeah, thank you. Very good response. So Maureen, as you were talking, I was thinking about our infrastructure issues, and the idea of lost talent came to mind. And I talked about the lost talent we have in our high schools right here in this area and across the nation, because they just don't have the basic things they need to go to the most competitive colleges. And I also think about the fact that if a student is very talented in basketball or football, they will be found. It doesn't matter what school they're at, the environment they're in, whether they're rural or urban, they will be found. They will have their records expunged. They will get SAT prep. They will have counseling for their parents. They will convince a parent in St. Louis to send their child to the University of Maine. So we know how to do it for all these other things, but we have mathematical talents, computer science talents, artistic talents that we're not tapping into. And as you were talking, I was really thinking about some of the rural communities and what they're not getting because our infrastructure grids are so antiquated. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for raising the whole issue of lost talent, because it sort of brings me back to the point that I made about the Commerce Department and its focus on sort of the global competitiveness of our U.S. companies. And one of the things that means is that we've got to have a talented, a digitally literate workforce in order to compete internationally. And when you talk about lost talent, there are pockets of rural communities that are disconnected both from educational opportunity but entrepreneurial opportunity as well. And that is one of the democratizing features of a broadband infrastructure because it does permit an ability to bring access to new markets for a rural entrepreneur, to physicians with specialized skill to a small rural hospital in a small town that prevents people from having to travel many miles to get good medical care. But the idea that an infrastructure that reaches everybody and an ability to use the technology in a meaningful way helps us to begin to identify lost talent and to cultivate it and to assist our school systems in doing just that so that we can create more entrepreneurs, so that people do have the ability to, for example, shadow remotely an entrepreneur. You know, I may be interested in, developing, some biophysical product, and I live in a place where I don't know, I don't have an extension service, for example, where I might get access, at a North Carolina A&T, for example, to a laboratory. But the infrastructure permits access that you may not otherwise have. And so that's why NTIA is very focused on trying to make sure that there are connections everywhere that are affordable and that people have the skills to use the technology so that it benefits them. Because not only with this new technology, there are many benefits, but there are also many dangers. And so we need to be mindful about how to use the technology in a way that is beneficial and not harmful.
Yeah, thank you. So Galvin, as you were talking about the history and legacy of the Urban League, I also thought about the leadership that the Urban League has had in this area, going all the way back to Whitney Young and his really innovative way of capturing the entrepreneurial spirit of African Americans, being unapologetically Black, but knowing how to tap into very traditional structures in order to better the community. And so I wonder, from where you are with the Urban League, what lessons have you learned that you can give to other Black organizations, even an organization like STEM for Us, to position ourselves to, really tap into the multi dimensions of the Black community and bring everything together and bring us forward?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing that I would say is, and I think it was mentioned early on by someone on the panel, but that to embrace change, understand that change, innovation is coming, and to embrace that concept, and to look at it as a position of strength in your business model. Interestingly enough, one of the great things about the infrastructure that is being built is one of the few industries where you have people who are going from, they started off laying fiber, now they have a team of 100,000 people across the country, right? It's one of those where you still have that old school traditional sense of climbing up the ladder. But what I've come across in a lot of my work is a lot of businessmen, entrepreneurs who started off and said, hey, wait a minute, I know this business, I know how to do this. So they use the expertise that they developed in the course of their training and started their own business, providing that service, right? So there's a huge opportunity in the infrastructure, particularly for subcontracting, because your Comcast, your Verizon, they can't do this all on their own. They're gonna subcontract a lot of this work out. And so one of the things, that is a huge opportunity where it's possible for us to get ahead of it and take advantage of those opportunities by just embracing this is something that there's a high need, it's a change. Let me try to see what I can do to be the first into this, as opposed to waiting to see how it shakes out.
Thank you. Yeah, great response. So Dan, as you were talking, and I was very enthusiastic when I was hearing everything you were saying about the district's initiatives to really make this a smart city and to have a grid that is cutting edge. And great nations need great cities. And if the nation's capital can't be one of the greatest cities on earth, then your nation has a problem. And when I look at some of the innovative projects that's happening across the world, when I see Dubai endeavoring to have passenger drones within the next couple of years, and I see Singapore having information technology in every single thing from their sewage system to their botany, to learn all these different things and really be on the cutting edge of understanding everything it takes to make a city move. And then when I see countries like Japan that's had the maglev for decades, and contrast that to the United States, where it seems like one of the biggest infrastructure projects that's on the minds of the top of the administration is a wall. That concerns me. And so my question is, how do, in this environment where in many ways it seems like, we're talking about walls in the coal industry and, things that seem to be relics of the past, how does a city move forward and do the things that we need to do to make great cities, but also how do we talk to the powers that be and get them to understand the importance of competing on a national scale, on the international scale? I know it's a loaded question.
Well, actually, I would answer that maybe sort of a little bit from the side. The way you, first of all, the way you make people.
You can talk to them. I don't want
Yeah,
to
okay. Say.
feel like
First of all,
the
the way you make people listen to you is you sit down and you make them listen to you. That was said a long time ago by one of my heroes. But it has to do, I think, oftentimes with community. And a community coming together as a community and becoming involved as a community. One of the things that particularly Betty Ann Kane has done is we now have an awful lot more citizens involved in our proceedings. Sometimes it's kind of messy like that when it goes, there's a lot more voices. But they're all there. And we want more to come because we want the people to be invested in their community and in their community's future. And I think that Washington, D.C. is an area I've never seen a community that's quite as dedicated to working things out as a community as Washington. Maybe there are some others that they have different kinds of problems and they work on it. But my thing would say is encourage citizen involvement at all levels. Learn how to speak to power. And you speak to power by sitting down and speaking to power. There's a bunch of kids in Florida who've taught us that lesson all over again. But I think I'm very focused on the district, even though I don't actually live in the district. But this community has such a potential and is exercising that potential. I mean, one of the great things about, I said we're going to need 10 to 15,000 little generators. An awful lot of those generators are going to be put on medium and low income houses. An awful lot of them. And I think that is something that the district is doing. That is something the district is doing as the district, as their vision of what the future will be. In other words, there is a community here that is really, I think, looking very much towards the future. And all we got to do is listen and work together, and I got a feeling we'll get there.
Thank you. All right, so as Betty Ann Kane, is she here now?
She's not come yet, but
Okay.
we're gonna go ahead and transition.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna try to get us back on time, so we won't have time for Q&A for the audience for this panel. But let's give our panelists a round of applause and great insights. And we're going to transition to our second educational panel in 5 minutes.
We're gonna take 5. There are cupcakes to the right. Please enjoy some more lunch if you're still hungry. In the meantime, we're going to transition to the education panel. So please take just a moment to refresh yourself if you need it. Otherwise, we're gonna get started in about 5 minutes, maybe less.